Accidental Talmudist wisdom you don't wanna miss. Now my pal Sal, take it away.
All right. Welcome to the Accidental Talmudist show and podcast. Normally we record our podcast at the offices of the Jewish Journal and release them later. But now that we're Zooming to make a podcast episode, we're releasing on Facebook Live as well. Welcome, Shloime Zionce, to the Accidental Talmudist show and podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's really awesome to be here.
It's great to have you. Shloime is the travel correspondent for Omni Magazine. As you can see, he is a visible Jew with his long payas and his kippah. We're going to ask him what particular brand of Hasidic Jew he is momentarily. But what his job has been is to visit places that we don't normally think of Hasidic Jews visiting, like Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Azerbaijan, India, Area 51. I want to hear about that. Egypt, Qatar, and Kentucky. And we're going to talk about all these places. Welcome, Shloime.
Thank you so much.
So why don't you give us a little bit of background? How did you get into professional travel writing and for Omni Magazine, and how did you come to be here today?
Okay, so as you can see, I'm a Hasidic Jew. I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and I have always wanted to travel, but you know, when you're a little kid, you don't always get to do exactly what you want to do. You can dream big, but you can't always act on your dreams. We had these family trips to New York to visit my grandparents, usually twice a year, around Sukkot and Pesach, so every year. And those were things that I really look forward to every year. But when it came to traveling long distance or out of the country, out of the continent, I never got to that until I was 17 years old, when I saved up $2,000 and convinced my parents that they should send me to Uman for Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.
I went to Uman, got hooked, and I just, since then, I haven't stopped traveling.
So to clarify for our listeners, Uman, Ukraine, and I've been there twice and have sent back quite a bit of video from my visits there, is a yearly gathering at Rosh Hashanah by the grave of Rebbe Nachman. In Uman, Ukraine, about 80,000 guys descend on this little town, and it is spiritually so elevating and raucous and fun, and what a wonderful experience. So that's how you first started traveling alone, was to Uman?
Yeah, I went with a friend, so it wasn't completely solo travel, but then a couple of months later, I went to learn in yeshiva in Israel for the first time, and I did that alone, obviously. On the way there, I managed to get a stop in Rome, and the way back, a stop in Paris. And that was how it started. I'd take any stopover that I could find, get the cheapest ticket, and as long as it was in a place where I hadn't stopped over yet, I would do it. So I got to see most of Europe that way. And after I got married, thank God I married a wonderful girl who also loves to travel. So
Beautiful. How old were you when you got married?
I was 21.
21, so old.
Yeah. So after we got married, we started traveling a little bit. I think first we went to Ukraine, then we went to Cyprus. I took my wife to Uman also, which was fun.
Really? Because there's not a lot of women in Uman during Rosh Hashanah.
Right. Yeah, she's not going to forget that one.
All right.
And then we went to Cyprus, and then about 2 years after we got married, or 2.5 years, we went to Thailand together for about 10 days. And while I was there, I just happened to mention in passing, in the meantime, I started writing for Omni Magazine, but I wasn't doing travel writing. I was just doing a little bit of some interviews, basic stuff. And while I was in Thailand, I mentioned to my editor that I'm in Thailand right now. And she's like, that's so cool. Why don't you write about it? So when I got home, I wrote something about the trip, and they printed it in the Pesach edition of Omni Magazine, Passover edition, which is probably the biggest edition all year. And then
the double issue.
I'm sorry?
The double issue. We always get two magazines.
Yeah, the double issue, right. So it's like, it's so big that it has to fit into two separate magazines. Otherwise, it
And
would
now, so people should know, not everyone is familiar with Omni Magazine. It's a very interesting magazine. We love getting it. It's actually a packet of magazines. Each
Right.
week we get our Omni, we get our Mishpacha, Omni Family Living. It's like sort of 6 magazines. It's from a very religious Jewish perspective, but with some really in-depth political reporting as well. And what's nice about Omni is in a time when print media is really retreating in many ways, Omni's only expanding. And the
Yeah.
magazine that we get each week, I mean, it's hundreds of pages long. And they don't tell you, oh, you can only write 500 words or 800 words, Shloime. You know, these are long articles. You really get to cover your story.
Yeah, I've written some like 16, 17,000 word articles for them.
There you go. You're not going to see that in Time magazine anytime soon.
Right. So basically, people started writing in letters to the magazine. They're like, we really liked when Shloime Zionce went to Thailand. Can he do more travel? So then they sent me to Mexico. That was the first Ami trip I did. They sent me to Mexico to cover a group of converts who they were like converting to become Hasidic, which is something very interesting. They're all living together in this small town in the middle of nowhere. This place is so small that Google didn't even know where it was.
Wow.
And that led to that. Then they sent me to Lebanon. And
so this was a group of probably Catholics, I mean, in Mexico, and they were sort of converting in mass and going all the way from zero to Hasidic.
Yeah, and there's this rabbi from Brooklyn who's I'm not sure if he's still there, but at that point he was living in Mexico and he was helping them. He was teaching them. He was helping them, with the whole process and converting them. They brought in like a group of 3 rabbis from Israel to do the actual conversion, and he was supporting them financially. Very interesting situation.
Yeah, I remember that story. I think it was a pastor who sort of first had the awakening, and then he brought his whole flock with him, right? Or
That was
a priest, I guess.
One of the people there was a pastor. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe they were evangelical, not Catholic. Maybe that was the story. I can't quite remember. But so then you got started on this beat, the travel beat.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to go through some of these stories for sure. Why don't we start with Afghanistan, where you visited the last Jew in Afghanistan? And what was it like getting there and just coming into the country must have been an interesting experience.
Yeah, so Afghanistan is not your typical tourist destination, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, they have suicide bombings, shootings, car bombings almost on a daily basis. So almost nobody goes there. Whoever does go to Afghanistan is either a citizen of Afghanistan who's living abroad, or you have some government contractors visiting there, a couple journalists, but it's really not for the faint of heart, to say the least. Getting a visa was quite easy, surprisingly. All you have to do is walk into the consulate in New York, and you have to come with a letter of invitation, which I had already arranged. And within 2 hours, I had a visa in my hand. And there aren't many flights that fly there either. So there's like 4 daily flights from out of the country. One comes from Istanbul, Turkey. There's one in Dubai. There's one from New Delhi, India, and there's one from Pakistan. The logistics worked out that the best way for me to get there and the quickest way for me to get there, and the way that worked out my schedule, was to go through India. Okay. So there's one daily flight from New Delhi to Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. And that was the flight I took. Even the flight itself was very interesting. There was a fist fight in the air right before landing. And when you land in Kabul, as you're like walking down the steps to the tarmac, they have, you literally have to go through a metal detector, like as you're stepping out of the plane, before they even allow you into the bus that'll take you to the terminal.
Okay. So wait a minute, let's back up a step. What was the fist fight about? Did you get the story on that?
I have no idea what the fist fight was about. I was just like cowering in my seat trying to stay out of it,
Okay. And so third world exit of the plane, down the stairs onto the tarmac. So rare these days.
Well, I think we get that a lot in Europe and other places. I wouldn't consider it third world.
No? Okay. All right. I don't remember the last time I came off. I guess it happened in Canada, actually, in Halifax, but it was a small plane. That was the last time it happened for me.
Third world. But I do it all the time. I'm like, I'd say like probably 30 or 40% of my flights are on the
Well,
tarmac.
you go to interesting destinations. Now, let me ask you something. In Kabul, because my brother-in-law used to travel to Iraq during the Iraq War.
What for?
He was involved in helping them develop a free press. Actually, it's very interesting. He's an
Oh,
international lawyer who helps, or at that time was helping countries develop a law to have a free press.
okay.
So it's very interesting. But during that time, to come into Iraq, like to land in that green zone, the maneuver that the plane would do is to descend very fast. So it was like really frightening, like a nosedive on a commercial airliner, and and then level out and make your landing. Was it anything like that going into Kabul?
Not that I recall. It was a pretty regular flight, aside from the fist fight and the metal detector when you got off.
Okay.
I will say, as we were landing, I noticed attack helicopters in the air surrounding the airport. So I think they keep a really close eye on what's going on over there. But I don't recall the landing being very rapid.
All right. All right. So now you're out of the airport. Tell me more.
Oh, you're not just out of the airport.
Oh,
You
you're
have
not
to
just
go,
out of the airport. There's more to
no,
the
no, no, no.
story.
You have to go through so many different checkpoints. They're checking like at every second, because as you can imagine, airport is like the number one place someone would want to attack. So getting out wasn't as hard as it was to get back in, but there were still a lot of checks. Surprisingly, customs was very easy. No one checked my bags. No one asked any questions. They just, you give them your passport, stamp you in. They don't even allow anybody into the airport area if they're not flying. So my guide who was waiting for me, I had to like walk outside till the street, and that's where my guide was allowed to take me from. They took me straight to hotel, and obviously along the way, like there's always things happening, and when you get to a country like Afghanistan, at least for me, I was in a state of like hyper awareness where I'm just looking out at every turn for the inevitable explosion or something that's going to happen. So like as we're driving up to the hotel, we're getting to like one of the streets close to the hotel. All of a sudden I see smoke billowing out of a building. I'm like, oh my God, this is about to blow. And I asked the tour guide, what's going on? He's like, oh, this is a kebab house. Like they're just preparing lunch. And so you just have to like get into that mindset that like this is a country, everyone is going about life, even though something can happen technically at any time, people go on with life. And that's something that I've learned about the Afghanis, and I've learned to admire it as well. You know, if you live in a Western country or a civilized place, you're usually not going to run into any kind of problems like they encounter every day, yet they go on with life, which is very impressive.
I mean, I think that one thing we've learned from the pandemic is there's always a new normal. Something that was
Yeah.
unimaginable before, and then it becomes the new normal. And people, I think the brain is just wired to take on a new normal and get on with whatever we're going to do.
Yeah, surprisingly, terrorism is down worldwide during the pandemic.
Who's going to go out? The governor's shelter-in-place orders must be holding back the terrorists. Thank God.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now I think something we might be wondering about is, as on all your trips, I don't think there's probably a lot of kosher restaurants in Kabul.
No, none at all.
None at all. So how do you plan the trip vis-a-vis food?
Okay, so I really love eating. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a foodie. I love going to restaurants. I love good food, but the one thing that comes before that I enjoy more is travel. So I'm willing to sacrifice decent food for an awesome trip. I usually travel with a lot of tuna, salami. Lately, I've been traveling with beef jerky, local vegetables. In many places, you can actually find kosher food. So like, for example, in Kabul, I walked into a supermarket and I found a ton of kosher products with the OU or whatever, with kosher certification. I made a video, I put it on YouTube. It's called, I'm not sure what it's called, something like shopping for kosher food in Afghanistan. And I literally like show myself walking through the supermarket, picking out kosher products. So I don't think anyone would go hungry if they ended up in Kabul or in anywhere in the world, pretty much, as long as there's some sort of Western supermarket, you will have what to survive on. But meat, yeah, you gotta bring that along.
Yeah, that's not happening. And you don't bring meat with you, right? I mean, it's
I will
just
salami,
yeah, salami, right.
yeah.
But you're not bringing steaks on dry ice or something in the
No,
suitcase
no,
for
no,
the
no, no.
grill. All right. So what was your mission? Was your mission to find the last Jew there?
Yeah, the mission was to find the last Jew, and thank God that wasn't too difficult once I got in touch with the right people. There's my guide. His name is Noor Muhammad Ramazan. He specializes in bringing Westerners to Afghanistan, and he wants to show off his beautiful country. And Afghanistan is a beautiful country. He told me that in his first year of business, he got like 2 or 3 clients, something like that. But lately it's been picking up. Before the pandemic, they had like 1 person a week or something was coming. So that's working out for him, thank God. He knows Zavulun Simintov, who is the last Jew in Afghanistan, and he was able to take me. Like we went straight from the airport to the hotel where I had to change clothing into local African clothing. Thank God I got the beard going on and I grew my hair long. So I looked like, I actually was like, they were telling me I looked like an Afghani, and I got this many times throughout the trip. So we're able to sort of blend in as long as I didn't open my mouth. And the hotel is a block away from the synagogue where Zavulun Simintov, the last Jew, lives. So once I was dressed up, we went straight to the synagogue to meet him.
Now, as I recall, when the story about him first started coming out, early in the century, right after 9/11, there were 2 Jews left in Afghanistan, and they wouldn't talk to each other. Did you hear about that?
Well, it wasn't only that they weren't talking; they really did not get along, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, but I guess Zevulun outlived him. Outlived his buddy.
Yeah, one of them passed away
in
2005, I believe.
So tell us about Zevulun.
So Zevulun's he's a complicated man, and as you can understand, if there are 2 Jews left in the country and those 2 Jews aren't talking, and I know that's a classic joke and whatever, but if those 2 aren't talking, you could just understand what kind of people they both were. They probably aren't very easy to get along with. I understand that he is divorced. He actually has 2 daughters living in Israel, but he hasn't seen them in probably close to 30 years. He was a carpet merchant at one point. I believe when he got arrested by the Taliban and during their reign, all his merchandise was taken away from him. I'm not sure he ever went back to selling carpets. He was in prison. Actually, the Taliban put him and the other Jew in prison, and they fought so much that the Taliban couldn't handle it, and they kicked them both out of prison.
Too violent for the Taliban.
Yeah, one of the Taliban commanders was recently interviewed, and he told the story. It came out like this summer. The guy from Taliban said, like, those guys fought so much we just had to kick them out. So I don't think they were fighting violently, just they didn't get along and it was causing too much trouble, so they let them go.
Just wasn't worth the trouble. That's hilarious. Okay, so and then do I recall that it became a mission to get a tefillin for the last Jew in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so let's evolve a little bit. So basically, I wanted to tell you that Zavulun, my theory about him is, once having met him, I feel like he has sort of like a hard shell. And living on your own in Afghanistan for 25 years can do that to a person. But once you crack it, he's really nice and he's really warm. So we spent a lot of time with him. I spoke to him about all sorts of things in life. I tried to figure out why he's still there. He keeps saying, life is great here and no one's forcing me to stay. I can go to Israel anytime. It's just, this is where I belong. This is Afghanistan. And I understand that he wants there to be a continuation of Jewish life in Afghanistan, because there has been Jewish life in Afghanistan for approximately over 1,000 years. So I think he wants to keep that there, and he sees himself as the last spark, if you will, keeping Judaism alive. He actually told me that the president of Afghanistan's wife is also Jewish. She's, I believe, a Lebanese American, but she's not Afghani. So she's located in Afghanistan, but she's not a Jew of Afghanistan.
Ah.
He was actually recently arrested for making wine. Now, from what I understand, he has the freedom to practice the Jewish religion, so that means that he's allowed to make his own wine. But I think he was selling it, so they arrested him, and he was in jail for a little bit. He got out a couple days before I came to visit him, and he said that the president of Afghanistan's wife intervened on his behalf and helped get him out.
Wow. So he's the last Afghani Jew. I mean, are there other Jews in Afghanistan working in diplomatic corps or something like that? Or
Yeah, so there's my understanding is like every American embassy in the Middle East has Jewish people working there. It's just I don't think that's a project of the State Department. That's just the way it works out. So
Right.
there are Jews all over the world. I'm sure there are Jewish journalists, probably private contractors there as well. But he's the last Afghani Jew who lives there. Now, while I was there, I did notice that we prayed together on numerous occasions in the synagogue, and his tefillin were in really bad shape. The shalrosh, the one that goes on the head, it was like it was missing a piece. The one that goes on the arm, the straps were completely ripped in half, and they were held together with a safety pin. So I asked him if if we could do something to fix his tefillin, and he said he'd be happy, but that would mean I'd have to take them, and then who knows how I'd get them back. So when I got back to the States, I asked a couple of friends to chip in, and we raised money to send him a pair of tefillin. I had this, someone, I posted this on Instagram. I said, does anyone want to contribute? And there was this embroidery company in Brooklyn, and they said, we love what you're doing. So I asked them, would you guys consider donating a tefillin bag? And they said, sure, we'd love to. So they actually made him a custom leather tefillin bag that looks like the flag of Afghanistan. And they embroidered his name on it. And then a friend of mine, another friend, really, really kind of him, he literally bought himself a ticket to Afghanistan and flew there just to bring it to Zevulun.
Wow. That's so nice. How old is Zevulun?
I believe he's about 60 years old.
Okay. May you live to 120 and keep the Afghani Jewish tradition going.
Amen. Amen.
So let's move on to one of your other destinations. One that you took a little bit of heat on was your Saudi Arabia trip.
Yeah.
Want to tell us about that?
Sure. So when I was approximately, I don't know, I must have been maybe 10, 12, 13 years old, my father had someone working for him at the time who had just got back from a round the world trip. And he'd spent possibly a year in India. And once he was in the area, he went to other places. And he was telling me that he was in Abu Dhabi. I'd never heard of Abu Dhabi before. And then he told me about Saudi Arabia, and he said that he would have loved to travel there, but they do not allow Jews in by law. And I was just thinking to myself, I was already having dreams about traveling and these hopes that one day I'd be able to travel all over the world. And I just thinking to myself, what a shame. Like, there's this country and I'll never be able to visit it. So that's just something I lived with for a while. And then I feel like as you get more ambitious, you start to think maybe there is a way. Maybe I could, convince the government to let me in or something. Maybe something could change. In October of 2018, the Saudi government announced that they would be issuing tourist visas for the first time in its history. Now, that's a very big deal because they've literally never allowed tourists in. The only people allowed to visit Saudi Arabia up till then were Muslims who are going to do the Hajj pilgrimage, which they're supposed to do once in their lifetime. Occasionally, they would issue business visas to people, but those are very, very complicated to get. And Saudi Arabia had been promising for a while that they're going to start giving tourist visas, but they kept pushing off the date. So in October of 2018, they announced they're going to be doing it. There was going to be a racing event in the capital city of Riyadh, a Formula E electric car racing event. And in honor of that event, they were going to be giving out visas for which it was like sort of a test period. So they would allow people in for up to a month, and then they have to leave, and we see how it goes. They ended up issuing only 1,000 visas. I don't think that was by I don't think there was a limit on the amount of visas they needed to issue. It's just the amount of people that applied. And I was one of those 1,000 people. So I'm one of the first people to ever experience tourism in Saudi Arabia. Prior to going, because I'd known that there are issues with, there can be issues with Jewish people, I emailed the Saudi visa authority and I said, hi guys, so, I'm really excited that you're opening up the country and I'd love to visit. Just a quick question. I happen to be Jewish and I know that in the past Jews have not been allowed into the country. Is it okay if I come? So, and the reason I was asking that is because actually on the visa application, they ask you what religion you are, but it's like you have to tick a box. And there was like Christian, Muslim, maybe Buddhist, Hindu, and then there was non-Muslim, but there was no Jewish. So I wasn't sure if that was, I didn't know what to make of it. So I emailed them and I just told them my situation. They said, all people of all religions are welcome to come. So I thought, great. And then the email came back like within 5 minutes. So then I figured these guys are, they're answering their emails. Let me try this again. So I sent them another email. I said, we've established that I'm Jewish. I just want to let you know that I'm also an Orthodox Jew. And I know you don't allow people to bring Bibles or crosses or Stars of David or whatever into your country. I'm going to be showing up with a whole bunch of religious paraphernalia. Is that okay? And they said, you are welcome to come, bring whatever you want. And they're like, I told them that I'm going to be praying in my hotel room, not in public. They ended it off with, may your prayers be blessed. So that was it. I booked my ticket and a week later I was in Riyadh.
Okay. All right. And was the mission just to experience Saudi Arabia or did you have something specific in mind as you were headed there?
No, so there was no mission at all. The mission was to just go to this place where no one's ever been and see what it's all about. Actually, when I landed there, as soon as you get off the plane, once you get into the terminal, not on the tarmac, they have a x-ray machine where they go through your bags basically and to see if you brought any contraband in. So someone, God forbid, could get someone were to be smuggling drugs, they could get the death penalty. Alcohol would get someone deported. So they just put your stuff through the machine and there's this woman manning the machine. My bag goes through, my big suitcase, and then my carry-on goes through and everything's fine. And there's a little bag with my tefillin. That's the last one to go through. And it goes through the machine and the woman's like, can you step aside, please?
So no problem with your, 12 pack of tuna and your long salamis and crackers.
Yeah, that wasn't the issue. Right away, they caught on to the tefillin. I was like, uh-oh, I'm busted. Here it goes. So it was like a woman fully clad in a abaya and a burqa. All you can see were her eyes, and heavy makeup because when that's all you can show, that's what you're going to emphasize on. And she says, "What's in the bag?" So I said, I'm Jewish. And she said, okay. And I said, I use these things to pray. So she said, can I see them? I said, sure. So I'm not sure if I opened the bag or the bag is opened. I take them out and I hand them to her. She sees these little boxes with leather straps. And she says, so what is this? So I said, I use these to pray. She says, what do you mean? Like, how would you pray with this? So I say, I put one on my head and one on my arm and I wrap it around. And she said, what's inside? I said, nothing. It's just leather and some little tiny scrolls with Hebrew letters written on them. So then she said, and then what do you do? So I said, I pray. So she had clearly never seen anything like it. And she said, do you have any other special technology I should know about? So I tried to contain my laughter and I explained to her there was nothing technological about it. It's just all
spiritual
of it
technology.
Yeah, spiritual technology. It's all made out of cows and natural things. And she said, okay, we're going to have to send you to the big boss. And I was terrified. And the woman she definitely saw that I was scared because she said, don't worry, everything is going to be fine. And she looked me in the eye and I could tell that she was smiling because her eyes were smiling. So they call over.
So that was a preview of the pandemic. Like two women in burqas, like now we talk to people over their masks and everyone's smile is in their eyes.
Yeah, back in the day when we still were allowed to see faces.
Right.
So they called over somebody who came over, and he didn't know what to make of it either at all. He was very confused. So then they sent me to the next guy. And there's a gigantic man. Like in Saudi Arabia, there are some people who are literally giants. We're talking 7.5 feet tall, gigantic person,
Wow.
big burly guy, and not the kind of guy you want to run into a dark alley or an airport in Saudi Arabia for that matter. And he took one look in the bag, and he like gave me this like the biggest smile ever, like this knowing smile, like, oh, I know who you are, it's fine. And he said he's fine, and then that was it. They let me out.
That's so interesting. He must have had some experience with Jews somewhere else.
No, I think he just knew what it was, but it was just like interesting because he probably saw like, you know, when you open up your country for the first time, you have no idea who's going to come, but you're pretty sure you know who's not going to come, and then the Jew shows up. So that was that.
Okay.
Then I took an Uber to my hotel, and when you get into your hotel right away, first of all, in the lobby, they have like pictures of the first king, the founder of the Saudi kingdom. Then they have the current king and the crown prince. They're all like in every hotel, every place that's on display. You get into your room, there's a arrow on the ceiling which points to Mecca so that you can know in which direction to pray. There's a prayer rug in the room. There's obviously a Quran in place of a Bible. And it's just interesting to see that.
So when you're in Saudi Arabia, when you're praying, are you facing north?
So,
right?
I think it's northeast. No, sorry, northwest.
Northwest, right? Northwest. Yeah. Okay.
And I was like using Google Maps to point to Jerusalem, you know, because it like puts a little pin where you are, and then you can turn and it shows you the. So yeah.
Yeah, like I like to play. I like to pray in airport chapels, you know, assuming there's not too much iconic imagery that makes it impossible in them.
Yeah.
And you know, usually Jerusalem and Mecca are in the same direction, right? In most
if you're in
airport
the United
chapels.
States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But once you're in Saudi Arabia, no, now it's a different direction.
Right. Yeah. So I got into Riyadh at night. So I took an Uber to my hotel, as I mentioned. Oh, so then I ate dinner, went shopping a little bit because it was a Thursday night. I was going to have to be there for Shabbos, which we can get to in a minute. But Friday morning at like 4 a.m., I hear shouting. And I'm like, uh-oh, something's wrong. And I wake up to this noise. And then like it takes 10 seconds for your registers like, oh, it's the minaret, the call to prayer. But it's so loud. There's no chance you're not going to wake up from it. So that's one of the, I consider it the perks of visiting Saudi Arabia is that you never sleep in and miss a day. You're up early if you visit that country.
Okay, so the muezzins, that's just everywhere and really loud. And
yeah.
It's that sunrise, right? Is that the sunrise service?
It's before sunrise.
Before, okay.
Black outside, yeah. But then, like in Saudi Arabia, everything closes when it's time to pray. So if you're sitting in Starbucks, and the prayer call goes off, the doors close. If you're inside, you're inside. If you're outside, you're outside. You can't, like, literally everything shuts down. All the stores shut down. All the businesses. I was the next day on Friday afternoon. It's a winter Shabbos. Okay, so Shabbos is coming in pretty early. I realized I'm missing a couple things. I needed something to make kiddush on, which was complicated because you can't bring alcohol into the country. And I didn't want to bring grape juice because, number one, I didn't want to be suspected of having alcohol. Number two, from a chemistry perspective, if the grape juice gets heated to a certain temperature, even by accident, it can become, by default, alcoholic, and then Shloime goes to jail. So I figured I was going to probably have to buy my own grapes and squeeze them or something. And I spoke to a rabbi, and he told me that I can actually use something that is considered honorable in their country. So in Saudi Arabia, the men drink non-alcoholic beer. So you have like Heinekens and Budweisers with zero alcohol. So I ran out to the supermarket to buy some of that. And then the call to prayer goes off, and I'm locked into the supermarket right before Shabbos, and the prayer is like, I asked someone, there's like this Filipino couple who they work for a rich Saudi family, and they're standing next to me, and I said, when is this going to be over? And they're like, yeah, probably 20 minutes or a half hour. So it really was nerve-wracking, but thank God I got out, made it back to the hotel room before Shabbos.
Okay. And would you say that, I mean, Saudi Arabia is a religiously run country. Is it a religious country? When the prayer call comes, does everybody stop to pray, would you say?
So officially, the country stops running. Everything stops. You know, the as I mentioned, the stores close and whatever. But no one's forcing you to pray. So if someone's obviously more religious, then they'll probably take out a mat and pray. And if someone wants to continue drinking their coffee, that's fine. But
what I'm asking is, did you observe like were you in a public place and like would almost everybody pray and just a few stay out of it? Or
no, if I was in the supermarket, I didn't see anyone praying.
Okay.
And people are walking around. You can continue your shopping, but the checkout counters are closed and you can't leave the store.
Okay, got it. So it's almost like a Christmas holiday in America. I mean, no one's working, but it doesn't mean that everyone's in church.
Right, but it's 5 times a day.
But it's 5 times a day, every day. Wow.
Yeah.
And about 20 to 30 minutes each time.
I think some of them are shorter. I'm not an expert, but
Okay.
yeah, I will say this. I was driving somewhere, and when the call to prayer, like I saw people on the roads praying. There's even in Jeddah on the boardwalk, they have these really cool like cylinders on like they're laying out there on the boardwalk, and it's basically like, I don't know how to explain this. You know, like when you have a tape measure and you pull it out and then it flies back in.
Mm-hmm.
So they have these carpets on the boardwalk that you can just pull out and pray on, and then when you're done, you just let go and it goes back in.
Retractable prayer rugs. It's great.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, so take us through it. So, because I mentioned at the beginning, I asked you about this story because you ended up getting yourself into some hot water, but it was not with the Saudi authorities.
Right. So, again, I'm not an expert on Middle Eastern politics, but I can tell you that there are numerous conflicts aside from the Israeli, Palestinian or Arab issue, shall we say. So currently, you have the United Arab Emirates has an issue with Turkey. In general, Turkey, there's like all these different teams. So it's sort of like Turkey, Iran, and Qatar are on one team against everyone else in the Gulf, pretty much. And they're fighting proxy wars, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. And so I went to Saudi Arabia. I had a wonderful time. I was like, it warmed my heart how nice the people were. Obviously, I wasn't walking around openly as a Jew for safety concerns, because you never know who you're going to run into. But overall, everybody was very nice. I had a wonderful time. It really helped me. It changed my whole view on Saudi Arabia and the region in general. When I left, I wrote the article for Ami. It was very positive. Really just positive coverage of what happened. I was honest, but my impressions were very positive. Life goes on. About 3 months later, I was in Thailand again with my wife, and we're out to dinner in the Kosher restaurant, and my phone is buzzing off the hook like crazy. So like, who's bothering me? It was a number that I didn't even recognize. Turns out that it was a reporter who works for Israel's largest newspaper. It's called Israel Hayom. And he had gotten my number from somebody in the Omni Magazine offices. Basically, Israel Hayom decided they wanted to use the story in their newspaper. And they were wondering if they had my permission or whatever. So we worked out the details. It was going to have to be translated into Hebrew. And a couple of weeks later, the story goes to print on the front cover of their weekend edition. And then so this happened, I don't know, Thursday or Friday. It's the weekend, right? I go into Shabbos, and as soon as Shabbos is over, I turn on my phone. I have like 1,000 messages. So what happened? Apparently, the Israeli government has a Twitter account called Israel in Arabic, where they use that to reach out to people who may be interested in learning about Israel and the Arab world. There's another one called Israel in the Gulf, which is like a virtual Israeli embassy to all the Gulf countries. They picked up the story, and they posted a couple pictures and tweeted that an Israeli journalist had visited Saudi Arabia, which I appreciate that they shared this story. There was one problem, that I'm not an Israeli citizen. Everything I did was legal. And unfortunately, many outlets in the Middle Eastern media picked it up, and they were reporting that an Israeli somehow snuck into Saudi Arabia, which, I mean, God forbid, I'm a law-abiding citizen of the United States, would never do anything like that. But all of a sudden, I'm the most hated person in the Middle East. And there's people are making YouTube videos about me. It's on the radio, it's on TV, it's everywhere. And I really didn't know what to do about it. Thankfully, I had a friend in Saudi Arabia who helped me navigate what was going on a little bit. Basically, it seems that a lot of people in countries that are unfriendly to Saudi Arabia, such as Qatar and Turkey, were using this to attack Saudi Arabia. It wasn't even so much about me. It was about how dear the Saudis let him in. So, that's what happened. I felt like I had to respond to all the lies, because there's somebody in Gaza. His name is Saad Basharat, I think. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember. It was like over a year ago, but I think that's his name. He's a university professor at Al-Quds University, and he took the story from Hebrew and translated it to Arabic. Didn't do a great job. And all the Arab media was basing the story on his translation. His translation had mistakes, like they claimed that I went to Mecca, which is illegal, and there's a checkpoint on the road to Mecca, and they don't let non-Muslims in. He said all sorts of things about me, which unfortunately they were not true and caused a lot of trouble. So I had to correct that. So I made a YouTube video about that as well. And just
I liked your video. You were moving around Brooklyn and just doing a few words in a different location. And
yeah.
It was well done.
It was my first time filming anything on YouTube, and I wanted to keep it interesting. So I figured if there's always a different location, maybe it'll be interesting. I could definitely take some tips for you about how to produce better videos. But a year later, the video has 60,000 views, almost 1,000 comments from people in Saudi Arabia. Most of them are saying, welcome, next time, please visit me, stay at my home. And I have returned to Saudi Arabia. I have visited Saudis in their homes, and I've made so many friends from this experience. So, it really, for me, it turned into something very positive.
So you returned to Saudi Arabia. Why? Just for fun? Or
So
follow up?
I have a friend in Saudi Arabia. His name is Mohammed Saud. And he is this guy who's really trying to promote peace between the Jewish people, the Israeli people, and Saudi Arabia. So he makes all these interesting videos. He taught himself Hebrew. He sings Jewish songs. He's a big supporter of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I'd been talking to him for a while. He visited Israel in July. And I was actually out of the country when it happened. But he went to the Temple Mount to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the Palestinians attacked him. Because
I was going to ask, is it dangerous for him to be doing this kind of interfaith friendship work?
Yeah, so it's not dangerous for him in his own country. No one's going to bother him there. People generally, respect the law in Saudi Arabia, and if they don't, there are harsh punishments. So he tells me that he's not worried in his own country, but when he leaves Saudi Arabia, he's worried. So I went to visit him. I flew there special to meet with him, and he invited me to his home. He prepared kosher food, and we talked, we sang together, we danced together. That was another controversy, because then I printed an interview with him and Ami, and the Israeli government posted that on their Twitter as well. And then there was a lot more backlash from the regular parties who like to bash us. So, that's life.
His last name is Saud. Is he of the royal family?
He's not of the royal family.
Okay.
Saud is a tribe. So like in the Middle East, many people have the same last name, and it doesn't actually mean they're related. It just means they're part of a greater tribe. And that is why there's like Al-Sharif, Al-Saud, Al-Habtur. It's whatever. That's for another time.
Okay. I see... excuse me, over on the Facebook side, there's been some comments, and somebody was asking, in your travels, do you go to a Chabad house? But it seems like a lot of these countries that you go to, even Chabad doesn't have a Chabad house there.
Right. So actually, I'm not going to mention exactly what, when, or where, but there are countries that have Chabad houses that are not on the official list. So there are countries where technically there are rabbis and many of them are there with the government's invitation and approval, but for sensitive reasons of security, it's not public knowledge. So number one, some of the places I go to do have Chabad houses, even though most people don't know about them. Number two, yes, I love Chabad. I'm always traveling to Chabad houses. And I've made so many friends with so many different Chabad rabbis all over the world. I consider them family. And I go to the Chabad convention where 5,000 rabbis come together every year in November. I attend that every year to, just to get inspired.
I've been there a couple times. It's fantastic.
Oh, nice.
What an event. Yeah. What a spectacular event. All right. So we've got some other primarily Muslim countries that you visited that we're going to talk about, but just to change it up a little bit, why don't you tell us about a couple of your journeys within the United States, to Area 51 and to Kentucky, and why is Ami sending you there?
Okay, so which one first?
Let's do Kentucky. Okay.
So Kentucky was really a last minute emergency thing. I got a text like one day. It was like, "Do you want to go to Kentucky?" I was like, "Yes." And then I guess the
answer with you is always yes. Do you want to go? Fill in the blank. The answer is going to be yes.
The answer is yes. That's true. The answer is always yes. I want to go. It doesn't always work out for scheduling or logistical reasons, but I do love to travel. It's my hobby. So the next day I flew to Kentucky in the morning to meet with the CEO of GE Appliances, and they're making some really cool technology to help Jews keep Shabbos.
We are well aware. Our GE oven has the Sabbath feature.
Oh wow!
We didn't get a GE fridge, but it's just part of the business now that refrigerators and ovens have the Sabbath feature. It's amazing because how big a segment of the population that's buying GE fridges and stoves needs the Sabbath feature. So why do they do that? It's a big investment.
Right. So I discussed that with the CEO, and he told me, like, if from a money perspective, it makes no sense. Financial perspective, there's no reason for them to do what they're doing. It's definitely a loss. But he did say that GE is a company that's focused on helping people. And if there's a community that needs help and there's a way that GE can help them, they're happy to do it. It was fascinating to see how much time and effort they're putting like their biggest heads, scientists and technicians and engineers onto this technology at a loss. But it's just really an amazing thing to see how that's being done.
Yeah, we're big fans, and I'll also mention I just wrote an op-ed for the Forward about the fact that Coffee Bean is giving up its kosher status.
Yeah, I saw
the
that.
Real bummer here in in the Southwest United States. There's a lot of coffee beans, and it's nice sometimes you're on the road and to know that you could get kosher food at like a regular place. You could take business meetings with people that don't keep kosher. It was really a treat to have that. And well, unfortunately, the chain got acquired by Jollibee. I think is a Philippines-based fast food chain. And they've decided that it doesn't make commercial sense to retain the kosher status. And in my piece, I wrote about, Coca-Cola. Why is Coca-Cola kosher? When you think about it, it's been kosher for a long time, since the 1920s. And at that time, Coca-Cola was getting very popular. It was big at the beginning of the century, but got really big in the 1920s. And people around the country, religious Jews, were wondering, is Coke kosher? And they wrote to the local rabbi in Atlanta. And he, reached out to the Coca-Cola company. And he said, I need to see your list of ingredients. So the formula for Coca-Cola is a closely guarded secret. It has been forever. And here comes this rabbi, I need to see your list. And they talked to the rabbi to understand exactly what he needed and why. And they actually made him sign a confidentiality agreement. And then they showed him the list. And he determined that everything was kosher except for the glycerin that was in it, that was animal-based, but it didn't need to be animal-based. And he worked with them and said, you can make the same exact compound from plants. And they invested the money and did it because at that time they were thinking, we want to reach out to America. We want everybody to be able to drink Coke. Jews should be included in that. And that was really the beginning of the sort of widespread hectoring of products that are going way beyond the Jewish community. And now you look in a supermarket and half the products have the kosher marking. And like, why would they do that? Why would these huge companies do that for such a small, even among the Jews, it's not that many that are keeping kosher and would care. But it's interesting how many people out there look for the kosher symbol as something that is meaningful to them, even though they're not Jewish. The fact that it's kind of a spiritual sign of approval, maybe because they're vegan or because, and it's a kosher parv, or there's just other reasons that they find it interesting to them. Muslims will look for it because things that are kosher are halal, etc. And I was really curious about your conversation with the head of GE, where it's not so much about what we're eating and whether it's kosher, but making these products friendly to the people that can't turn their ovens on and off or their refrigerator lights on and off on Shabbos.
Yeah, it's just a really impressive team over there. And what can I say? There was one place I'd love to go back to, and I didn't even get to see Kentucky. I just would love to go back to that factory. Really cool machinery, like everything I was really blown away by that.
So that is awesome. And what about Area 51? You want to explain what that is?
Sure. So I might not be the best person to explain it, but obviously anybody with access to the internet can do some Googling and find out all about Area 51. But it's essentially, it is an Air Force base located deep inside the Nevada desert. No one really knows what goes on there. But the idea is that, the idea that people have is that all sorts of projects regarding to these super powerful weapons of the future may be developed there. It's also located in a place known as the Nevada testing range and training site, which is where the United States has conducted tests on new kinds of airplanes, on probably nuclear weapons and stuff like that. So this has led to many people citing all sorts of UFOs and other interesting phenomenons. I cited two myself while driving to Area 51. I know people won't believe me, but I saw this silvery thing flying across the sky so quickly that I couldn't imagine it was anything natural. And the idea that it is a training site, and the government has confirmed that, makes it quite easy to understand that it's very likely they are testing new weapons and new things there. So if you see something interesting, you may in fact have seen something. It could also be the project of your imagination. I have a whole theory about it, like people who are crazy enough to drive into the desert for 3 hours to see nothing need to justify it by seeing something. So, I really don't know what it was, but that's that. There's also this idea that there are aliens that are being kept at Area 51. There's this theory that the whatever crashed in Roswell, New Mexico was taken to Area 51. So this has inspired all sorts of, there's an alien-themed hotel called the Little Alien. And there's a bar there, and they have a big gift shop called the Alien Research Center. There's an alien beef jerky, and there's an extraterrestrial highway. It's just an interesting place, and definitely anybody who you're going to meet over there is an interesting person.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you went to Egypt, and I was given the note that you climbed Mount Sinai. Now, is that how you would refer to your experience there?
So number one, that was actually a year ago today, exactly.
Okay.
I did go to Egypt. I don't know if I climbed Mount Sinai. I hope I did, but I'm not sure. As many people who are familiar with deeper Jewish knowledge are aware of the fact that we have no official location for where Mount Sinai is. We know the region, but we don't know where it might be. So there are many signs that could point to a mountain which today is called Mount Sinai, and there's the St. Catherine's Monastery is built at the foot of that mountain. That's the one I climbed. It was a fascinating experience. It was I felt it was very spiritual for me, but I don't know if it was the actual mountain. And I spoke to my rabbi before I went, and I asked him about it and if he thought it was, be worth anything. And he said, you may not be climbing the actual mountain, but you're definitely going to be closer to the mountain than any of us have been. So I took that and ran with it.
Yeah, I remember there was a book. What was it called? I think Bruce Feiler's book, right? Like Walking the Bible. I think it was called Walking the Bible.
Okay.
And he went there to that same place, and he got to know some of the monks at that monastery, St. Catherine's Monastery. Yeah, and then I emailed one of the monks back at the time that I read that book. It's got to be 20 years ago. And he responded, and we had a correspondence for a while. And I just thought it was so cool that I was, emailing with a monk on Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
It might be Mount Sinai, as your rabbi said. At least Mount Sinai wasn't far away, somewhere in that region. It's not the tallest of mountains, as we read in the Torah.
Right.
God chose a humble mountain, and it's a great teaching there. So. It was that the purpose to go there to see Mount Sinai, or was that just a more generalized Egypt trip?
That was the entire purpose was to try to see Mount Sinai, and I got in there. We crossed into Egypt from Eilat, Israel, probably at about 2 or 3 p.m. And then we were taken to a hotel or a hostel where we stayed until about 1 a.m. and then climbed the mountain until like 10 a.m. Well, you used to get up, and then I spent 2 or 3 hours at the top and then went down and then straight back to the border. So yeah, we really, it was 100% just to go there. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question here for you, Shloime. What kind of Hasidic Jew are you?
So I'm glad you asked. It's a complicated question, and it's a question I ask myself all the time. And it's not only what kind of Hasidic Jew, it's what kind of Jew are you? And the answer is I'm not quite sure. I grew up in Bobov. That's a very large Hasidic group. This comes out of Poland, started probably mid-1850s, and it's a subgroup of the greater Sanz dynasty, which has numerous sects in it. So in Toronto, that's the school I went to. I went to the Bobov day school, and then, we always davened in the Bobov shul in Toronto. So I'm very connected over there. Later,
and let me back you up a step, just for people that this is all very unfamiliar.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of people sort of look at Jews and say, oh, okay, well, the guys, that have the long hair in front, they're the really religious ones.
Yeah.
And the ones who don't are not so religious, and like, that's it. And people need to understand that even among the very religious segment of the Jews, there's a lot of different streams of Judaism. And Hasidic Judaism is actually not that old. I mean, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, was teaching early 1700s, basically.
I think it was like even late mid 1700s.
Yeah, like early mid 1700s. And then he had one primary student, the Maggid, who then had a bunch of his students. And so is that sort of second generation after the Baal Shem Tov, who was a sort of a coterie of students, and they brought those teachings back to their communities and began what could be called these Hasidic dynasties. Yeah. And now you have a lot of different streams of Hasidic Judaism. There used to be many more. So some of them have sort of faded away, especially, unfortunately, because of the Holocaust. But of course, some are very active. And you could probably, having grown up in it, you could probably name 20 or 30 different streams, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Easily. Okay. So go on with your story.
I'm connected with like 20 or 30 different streams. So grew up in Bobov, and I still have a very strong roots over there, a strong connection over there. When I was 16, it's a whole story in itself, but I was in a restaurant in Lakewood, New Jersey, and I was at a bit of a rough point in my life, and I found a little pamphlet from Breslov, which is one of the more, and I hope I'm not going to offend anybody by saying this, one of the more abstract Hasidic sects. And there's a lot of inner stuff that many of the listeners may not understand. But Breslov is one of those groups that, like, if you're on the outside of it, you don't understand what they're doing. And it can look like really interesting. Once you're in, it's like the best thing ever. So Breslov is in many places can be frowned upon, in my opinion, by people who don't understand it enough. So I had to like hide the pamphlet for like, I didn't want anyone to know I was reading it, but I read it again and again and again, and it changed my life. So I got very involved with Breslov, and then I started going to Uman for Rosh Hashanah and whatever. And also I'm very connected to Chabad, because I think the Lubavitcher Rebbe was probably the greatest person to ever live in the last 50 years. And I'm very connected with many of the rabbis that he sent all over the world. And in general, I want to be connected to every sect of Judaism. I want to be connected with everyone. I just want to be like one with Am Yisrael. So the issue is, I don't like to put labels on myself. I've done that in the past, and I think it was a mistake, because like I'll do something one way, and then someone will be like, hey, but in Breslov they do it the other way. I'm like, yeah, I know, but this is how I like to serve Hashem. So I sort of feel like I'm taking the best from everywhere. And again, no offense to anybody's traditions or anything. This is the way I do it, and this is what brings me closer. And they say we're all trying to get to the top of the mountain, and there are many different routes. So I'm paving my own way.
That's for sure. I sort of dealt with the same question myself. People ask me what I'm doing, and I just say I'm a Torah Jew. And I think that can apply to everybody who just wants to be close to Hashem through the Jewish tradition, and through mitzvahs. We don't dismiss the mitzvahs. Right. I mean, the Breslov tradition is so interesting. When you called it abstract, I mean, it's a little bit because Breslov has not had a living Rebbe for such a long time. Right. But also because when you go to Uman, you see this. I mean, on the one hand, you have Breslovers who, just kind of look young and hip, and, it's like a young hip crowd, let's say, with long payas and everything, but into music and young and hip. And then there's another crowd that's Breslov that really looks so much more traditional, the older guys in the dark coats, etc. And it looks like it must be two different traditions, and it's not. It's Breslov. It's definitely people dedicated to the teachings of Rabbi Nachman.
Right. So actually, it's interesting because I recently learned about this, that Rabbi Nachman had a couple things that he wanted people to do. And if you do those things, like, he would consider you a Breslover. One of those things is to learn a little bit of halacha every single day. And another thing is to do hisbodedut, which is like, meditation or time for reflection, talking to God every single day. And coming to Uman for Rosh Hashanah is considered one of those things. So in Breslov, they say, if you do those three things, you're a Breslover. For a while, I called myself a Breslover, and I wouldn't take that back, but I have to be honest. I don't always do hisbodedut every day, and I try to learn halacha every day. I've been pretty good at that lately, but I don't want to take something that doesn't belong to me if I'm not there yet. So I've come to see myself as somebody who's connected to Rabbi Nachman and his teachings, very connected, but I'm not sure I would say that I'm a Breslover. Right? That to me is like a very it's a big commitment and something very serious. I don't play around with that.
Thank you for that. So let me just ask you, I mean, I've been sort of guiding you with questions, but is there some story or stories you'd like to share from your journeys that just really stands out, memorable, colorful?
There are so many different experiences that I've had that I would love to share. I'm working on a project that will probably turn into a book. With stories, and we're only just getting started. I only took on this job less than 3 years ago. So I hope there'll be many books and many stories. But one of the things that really stands out to me, and this is a theme that I've encountered all over in all my travels, is the way that the Jewish people have held on to the Torah and our traditions and the mitzvahs is unbelievable. Wherever you go in the world, there are practicing Jews who are observing everything they can, and there's different flavors of Judaism. So you have the Sephardic, and even in the Sephardic communities, there are so many different kinds. And then there's the Russian communities and the Roman communities, and they all have their own customs, but they're all essentially doing the same thing. And I've seen people who have really, really, really sacrificed a lot, especially in the former Soviet Union and places like that, just to keep Judaism alive, to marry Jewish, to do things like that. I was in Azerbaijan, and you have people who grew up under the communist regime, and no one ever taught them how to practice Judaism properly. So now, the former Soviet Union is gone, but for these people, their childhood is gone. Their time when they should have learned all this stuff is gone. Now, it's never too late. They're trying, but once a person's older, it's definitely not like they can't absorb it in a sponge-like fashion as children do. So you have people who can't read Hebrew, yet I've seen them in Azerbaijan. They're going to shul every single day, 3 times a day, and they don't know how to pray, but they sit there in the shul and they're quiet during the minyan. Some of them come with a book or a newspaper, and it warms my heart to see these people who don't know why they don't know what to do there, but they know why they're there, and they're there to pay respect to God. And it's just unbelievable. Wherever you go in the world, you will see people who have sacrificed so much to do the right thing. And I believe that it's imperative that we, because of all the suffering that we've gone through and that other people before us, the sacrifices that they've made, we have no choice but to continue to keep the flame of Judaism alive, with all our power.
I think it's so important what you're saying, Shloime. I mean, we are really blessed, privileged to live in America, a place where we are so free to practice our religion. Nobody interferes with us. We're encouraged at the highest levels of government to express ourselves as Jews. It's never been so easy to be a Jew. And probably 80% of the Jews in America don't bother. It's like if it was a little bit harder, it might be dearer to people. If it was more difficult to practice, it might mean more to people than in a time when it's so easy. It's crazy to be saying that.
Yeah, and like one of the things I think about all the time is that, like, in today's world, you can literally sit in your underwear on the couch and call Uber Eats, and in 20 minutes you have a delicious burger and fries at your doorstep. Like, I know people who broke ice to go to the mikveh, people who had to shecht chickens, in the middle of the night, or make a bris in a cellar. It's so easy, and it's become so simple, and the information is there, the knowledge is there. No one's going to force you to work on Shabbos. There's never been a better time to be a practicing Jew.
Yeah, I mean, stories like guys that were in Siberia during the Soviet Union and sneaking to make a sukkah, like just a sukkah for one person, getting some kind of a skacha roof over them so that they could make the bracha, the blessing of being in the sukkah, and risking their lives to do it, and now we have it so easy. If somebody's listening to this, and you're hearing some of these stories about the lengths that people went to in the past so that they could practice their Judaism. So the next time you have an opportunity to do something, to put on tefillin, to light Shabbos candles, it's not going to be so soon to go to a shul, but sooner or later we could go back to our synagogues. So go and visit and exercise your right to be a Jew in the modern age. It's so important. And
if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your bubby who or your Zaidi who was bar mitzvahed in a cave. I know somebody who was literally bar mitzvahed in a cave. This man is in his 50s in Russia, because they could have all gone to Gulag forever if they were caught. If you're not doing it for yourself, do it for all those people who sacrificed so much to keep this thing going. And now that we live in such an amazing world, let's not stop now.
Amen. All right, let me just see if there's any final questions I'd like to ask you. Well, one thing is this, Shloime. So you're a young guy, but I would have to say you are a seasoned traveler. Yeah? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So,
Guilty.
so do you have some general travel tips? What's some wisdom from the front lines of travel from Shloime?
There's so many travel tips. Number one, pack light. They usually have what you need where you're going. The exception for that is kosher food or let's say your tefillin or whatever. Don't rely on them. You're going to go to Norway to see the Northern Lights, and an Eskimo is going to have tefillin for you. That's not likely to happen.
All right, and if
So,
you're bringing kosher food, so what are you bringing? The bags of tuna, not the cans, right?
I take the packets, the one that don't have any metal in them, so I can keep it in my carry-on in case my checked baggage doesn't get to where it needs to go. Speaking of checked baggage, never put any valuables in your checked baggage. I made this mistake one time. I've never made the mistake, actually. What happened was I was flying from New York to New York to Almaty, Kazakhstan, via Kiev, and I came really late to check in New York, and they told me your roll-on suitcase is not going to be able to come with you in the plane. You're gonna have to put it under. So I was like, okay, fine, just take it. And I forgot that I had my old iPhone in there. And then when I got to Kazakhstan, it wasn't there anymore. So never put any valuables in your checked baggage, and your insurance your credit card certainly won't cover it. Your credit card might cover it. You know who won't? The airline won't cover it. They will give you $600 for whatever was in your bag, and that's it. If you have travel insurance, possibly better, but still, who wants the heartache and have all the bureaucracy?
And I'm sure it'll take a long time to get that $600.
Yeah. I still haven't gotten back money for my phone, and that was 2.5 years ago. I'm still working on it. What else would I say? Take the window seat. Well, that's
I'm a window guy all the way.
Yeah, me too. Don't sit in the middle if you have anything to say about it. Come early to the airport. Missing a flight is never fun, and you need a good travel pillow.
Not the inflatable. You do the little foam neck deal. Is that
no,
what you
I don't do the inflatable. I do the foam. Another thing I would say, and this is, I think, the most valuable piece of travel advice I'm going to leave with anybody, is don't be afraid to immerse yourself in what you see. And some of the best travel experiences you're ever going to have are those that you could never plan. They're going to be spontaneous. Obviously, be careful from scammers, kidnappers, whatever. Do things safely, but interact with people. Show them who you are. See who they are. And if you would have told me 2 years ago that I'd have hundreds of friends in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and Dubai and Oman and Syria and in Iran, and I would never have believed you. But because I'm open to meeting people, and my wife thinks I'm a little bit too open to meeting people, but because I'm open-minded, and I just love everybody, and I wanna get to know as many humans as possible. This has given me the greatest experience ever. There are people who there are many people from many countries who I was afraid of my whole life, and now I love these people. So the world is a wonderful place, and try to see the good in the world, and seek out the light wherever you can find it.
And as you're doing that, I think a lesson that you really teach with your example is to be yourself, right? You're not pretending to be something you're not out there. You are an open, outward, Torah Jew or religious Jew in countries that you wouldn't have thought you could form these relationships. And here you're telling us you have hundreds of friends in these Muslim countries, and it's beautiful. We find the same thing on the Accidental Talmudist page. There's a lot of curiosity, people to people. They want to know each other.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the Accidental Talmudist show and podcast. This is going to be released as a podcast once we clean up the recording, etc. Do you want to share with people where they can learn more about you and your writing and your own podcast? Sure.
So number one, I'm working on the website, but it's not up yet, so I don't have a website as of now. I have a podcast, which is called "You Are Not a Goat." I basically, instead of sheep follow people, goats also, they're herd animals. That's the idea. You want to be your own person, not a follower. If you want to learn about that, you can find it everywhere where there's podcasts, YouTube, iTunes, the Google Play Store, whatever. You Are Not a Goat by Shloime Zionce. Additionally, I have a really awesome YouTube channel where I chronicle my travels, and you can see things that you probably will never see anywhere else on that channel. If you want to find out what kind of kosher food you can find in Afghanistan, or what the top of Mount Sinai looks like, or if you want to see a Hasidic Jew dancing with an Arab sheikh in Saudi Arabia, it's all on my YouTube channel at Shloime Zionce. Additionally, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at CHUSIDEL. That's Chusidel. That's like a nickname for a chassid. So CHUSIDEL. And I look forward to hearing from all your from whoever's interested. I love hearing from the people and interacting with new people. I love meeting new people, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on your program. I'm a huge fan of what you do, and one day, God willing, we'll meet together in person and make a l'chaim.
Amen. And may it be soon.
Amen.
All the best, Shloime. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Be well.
Take care.